states that are to the public, state, nation, God, it's called liberty and justice.
Meeting starts 7:14. Can we go over the agenda? Number 3 on here.
Yeah, but we can't vote on, oh, I mean, the agenda changes, and I'll propose that we move the elections up the beginning, but you gotta have a quorum in order to do the elections. So as soon as we get a quorum, we should have the election sound like the door's opening. And then also we should put on the 2024 agenda. That can go near the end.
About public comment? No. No public comment.
We could discuss the topics that we're going to discuss anyway. I mean, we were going to discuss the septic system ordinance, the short-term rental stuff, and the mobile home age limits. We just can't make any decisions or vote on it.
Exactly. Can we approve the minutes?
Nope.
Okay, then we'll just go on to septic.
We could talk a little bit about that, I guess. Did everyone get the information that was sent that had to do with the Lyon Township ordinance and the article in the Resorter where they kind of summarized where the rollout was going to be and what the objections were, that sort of thing?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
One of the things I like to caveat, just before we get into this stuff, I talked to Dave Woody at some other issues, and they came up on these two because of some of the scheduling stuff and the potential site plans and all that with the agendas and the amount of stuff in the agenda. Anyways, Dave said that he was not looking to get a draft or of these two things that we've been talking about, septic or the short-term rentals. What he was looking for is just for us to track who's doing what, where, and what the issues are. So I think I just put that up front so I would recommend, because he wasn't interested in really pursuing, especially like the septic stuff. He said, at least in his term, right now, Terry can do that.
I know on the short term, he said, let's see how the other townships are doing and what the downfalls are, what the up things are before we actually put in a ordinance for short-term rentals. Same type of deal. Just let's talk about it, see how it's going. Kind of the same thing for the septic is it working? Is it not? Obviously they've had feedback for sure.
Yeah, and Lyon actually did establish an ordinance.
Yes, I have that one right here.
So anyways, I just bring that up to say, all this stuff is a good start on there, but as far as like actually, trying to put words to an actual document right now, I think that we can note these things, but it's probably not worth our time at this point because the board is not going to be amenable to try and push something at this time. We can keep doing what we're trying to figure out. But anyways.
Well, what I think we should do is look at the nuances. These ordinances, just like Greg pointed out in his notes, they have a lot of, there's a hell in the details. And we can explore those details and identify the issues so that if the board does decide to do it later, at least they understand what the process is going to entail, and that'll help them make a better decision if they want to go forward with it or not. Because between the enforcement, the fees, the inspections, setting up the process to determine who needs inspection first or last, and there's a lot to it. And we could just touch on those subjects and identify the things that would need to be decided ahead of time, kind of like what Greg noted in his report. I think we can do that.
Yeah, and then Dave was actually saying that essentially.
Yeah. So, Greg, why don't you go ahead and go over your notes that you sent us, and we can start there.
Okay. One of the things that I was going to talk about first was that the Lyon Township ordinance itself is probably something that the details might not be totally important to us, but I think everybody should go over what their ordinance was and make their own questions about what they thought were things that we should discuss. If we all go over it and we all came up with, I think it's perfect like it is, then our discussion's over. And then it's just a matter of, well, here's what we feel the board should look at before we get them to opinionate about whether they want something or don't want something. Here's the something. If, on the other hand, there are sections of that we think we should change slightly, then we can discuss that, make those changes, and pretty easily, I think, come up with what we feel is what the Planning Commission believes that a septic ordinance should look like. And if we can get to that point, I think we've accomplished a lot. And so the Lyon ordinance, I think if everybody's not looked over it now, it would probably be a good idea to look over it, make notes about it, and assume that at our next meeting, we would have a more central discussion about it. And I did send later in the day today, I'm sorry, I just didn't get the resorter myself that had this article, but they talked about the ordinance that was passed, and they talked about how they intend to roll it out. Things like that it's supposed to start on April 1st, and the first things they'll be doing are inspections on the oldest systems, or systems that maybe don't have any records in the health department. And then after they get those mostly done, then they'll go to systems that are a lot newer, but maybe still have been in existence for 10 years rather than 20. So things like that are the details I think that we want to talk about. And then part of what I think our recommendation needs to be is a discussion in some way involving the Gerrish Township Board, and ask them, if they feel they're willing to enforce the ordinance if we have it, which would mean actually take cases to court if people don't comply. And, if that decision's made positively that they would do that, which is what Lyon Township has determined, by the way, then I think we can consider seriously putting one into effect in Gerrish Township. On the other hand, if we felt that the board didn't have any inkling of how they'd want to go about that and didn't want to commit to enforcing it correctly, I think then that would need then to be part of our discussion and recommendation as to whether there should be an ordinance at all. So those are kind of some of my original thoughts.
I know, Greg, that they thought about, should we be the same as Lyon? So they're consistent for the whole lake, or doesn't that matter?
Well, I think that there would be some value to that. That's just my opinion. And if there were, very minor things that had to do with specifics of one township or another, but the major issues were all there, I think that's probably good enough. I think the important thing is having something that's consistent enough so that the public's not confused, and having something that's enforceable so that we can actually make something that we can use to better the situation that we're after. So I wouldn't be adverse to using the Lyon Township septic ordinance as I've read it. And yet I think that there's still some areas where we could discuss it and decide as a planning commission if we think that there's room to modify it.
I agree with that.
Well, I've gone through the ordinance, and I've made a bunch of notes, and I have quite a few questions actually on the difference between the police powers and an ordinance and stuff that I think that one resident was referring to on the passage of their ordinance. But the one thing in there, if you look at their ordinance, section 12, it's the requirement for a performance-based disposal system. In that, as you read it, they're creating what they call District A. And they describe District A in an attachment A to the ordinance. We don't have a copy of that attachment, which describes District A. So I got a feeling that District A is related to the lakeshore. And that's where, if, let's say you needed a new system and you couldn't comply, or you could not fit a standard septic system that's approved by the health department on your property, you might have to go to a hybrid system of some type, a performance system. And but I think the key here is we really need to know what District A is and how it's described and so forth. So that's one thing we need to check into or be aware of. Then some of their other stuff, they're basically just restating exactly what the Central Michigan Health Department does. And they're kind of taking over, to me, they're conflicting with them in the sense that who's doing the actual work? And there's a lot of redundancy. It's like we're creating the same reports multiple times, and it's just going to be a burden on the homeowner and the government, in the sense of the word, to keep track of it all. So I think that their ordinance could be cleaned up quite a bit in just the mechanics of it. And I could be wrong, but I'll detail those notes out and send them all to you, and then you can look at the ordinance and read what I'm trying to express to you now. And because I think this is what you're alluding to, Greg, is let's find out how much of it we think fits, and if there's something wrong in it, or we feel is wrong, we need to investigate it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it would
not
be a
to
good
come to
idea.
time to get a new ordinance, but it's just this is the kind of stuff that we need to flesh out.
Mhm.
Because
And
this will be determining how much this thing costs to implement and so forth. And I think the board would probably like to have an idea of that before they pull the trigger on it too.
my thought was that everybody on the planning commission might read through the ordinance and make a similar set of notes about what things need to be looked at more closely. And then we can amalgamate all of that together and get answers to everyone's questions. And then and some of these things might be things that we would still have to talk to Lyon Township and ask them what their intention was. And exactly like you mentioned, Tom, they have a section A, and I believe that you were correct in assuming that it was property where their properties are very close together and right along the lake.
Yeah,
But
high density.
yeah, high density stuff. But there may
give you-
also be properties that are totally in non-compliance with anything that the health department wants them to do now too. And I'd like to know, exactly what it is their intention is as to how to handle those. If your lot is such that you couldn't possibly put any sort of septic system in a position where it wouldn't be in non-compliance with the health department's rules about septic location and well location, then I'd like to know exactly what their intention was as to how to handle that.
I'll give you an example of a worst case scenario. We were doing work on a house in Lyon Township over near the Legion grounds. In fact, it might have been in the Legion grounds. It was. It had a small creek running alongside of it. His septic system failed. They came out and looked. He had no place to put it. He couldn't meet any of the requirements to be away from that creek and so forth. So he was forced to put in, his only alternative was to put in a holding tank.
Right.
And when that holding tank filled, he had to pump it.
Yeah.
So that's your very worst case scenario you're going to run into.
Mhm.
I don't know whatever happened to that, if he was able to tap into the sewer system that was part, I think, yeah, that area got that sewer system from, Camp Cornelius.
Yeah.
And so I think that alleviated his problem, but that's what could happen in some properties, some instances. That's their only resort. I'll give you another example. When you go through that ordinance, look at section 9. It's the requirements for construction of a septic disposal system. A, B, C, D, and E basically are just regurgitating what the health department does. This is all the responsibilities of the health department. I mean, you could easily take that whole section and just say all systems have to follow the Central Michigan Health Department guidelines, requirements for a septic system. I don't know why they're putting that all in there unless they think it's easier for the public to find out. I don't know. So those are the kinds of things I'm noticing. Even F under that section, section 9, there might be some conflict with the building permit requirements. So I got a lot of questions. I know they had an attorney look at this, you know, and like that section 9 that I just said, you could leave it in there, but you don't really need to. To me, it's just cluttering up the waters. But anyway, those are the kind of things we're thinking of looking at.
Mhm. I also think that they put language in there about accessibility. And I believe that there are some houses that really don't even have accessibility to their septic tanks. So things like that are also things that are going to have to be dealt with as they come up. So
I can tell you right now, if the lot's that tight, that crowded, every septic hauler, the pumpers, they got hose. They can go 40, 60 feet. I doubt if that's really going to be an issue. It might be an issue if they had to replace it, getting the equipment back there or something. But for general maintenance, it shouldn't be a real issue, I wouldn't think.
I understand that there are some of the tanks that are actually under houses, like under concrete. It's not a matter of the distance so much as they're inaccessible from that standpoint.
Yeah, there could be. There
Yeah.
could be. It's not unheard of people pouring a patio over
Right.
the tank, you know.
Right.
But those will just have to be dealt with on an individual basis and so forth. You're always going to have those outliers that are just don't conform to nothing, and you just got to deal with it.
Well, anyway, my suggestion is that everybody go through it like Tom just did and come up with whatever questions and modifications that they might feel like doing. And then at our next meeting, we can sit down and go over all those things. I just don't think everybody's prepared to do that now. And if that's the case, I think that's our first step.
I agree. I think that'd be, you know, to get it clear on everybody what we're trying to do. Is that Val there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah, we officially had a quorum at,
Sorry, it took me a little bit longer to get back from Kentucky.
Hey, glad you made it safely.
Same here.
Beat the storm.
I know. That was important.
Very.
Well, Mike, if you want to go ahead and start the meeting officially and go back to your agenda, you could.
I kind of already did start the meeting officially though, I thought, but,
yeah, I duly noted the quorum, and then in the minutes, we'll say, you know, we just,
well, we have a quorum now, so we can, continue on to, election of officers.
You want to do number 5 first? Where we at?
did the officers first.
First, okay.
That's- And so the first one is a nomination for the chair. And I would nominate Tom Barber.
I'll support.
Do you accept, Tom?
I do.
If Jerry wouldn't have supported, I would support it.
Who seconded it, Terry?
Thank you, Terry.
Okay. And then with that, I move that we close the nominations for chair and a vote on accepting Tom Barber as the chair of the planning commission. Second.
I'll second.
Okay.
So Terry,
Then we have the vote you call for.
so let's just vote on it. Terry,
Yes.
Yes.
Mike, Val,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Greg, yes?
Well, I don't get to vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You were not here. So it passes then,
Also,
Tom's.
Next one is the vice chair. You can, I mean, I'll make the nomination to
Mike,
Mike Perky to assume the vice chair again.
I support.
I accept.
Okay, any others? I move to close the nominations and vote to elect Mike Perky as the vice chair. Second,
Yes.
call for the vote.
Okay. Terry,
Yes,
Mike,
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Okay. Nami, yes.
Okay, the next one is for secretary. I'll let somebody else. I'm willing to do it again, but
I nominate Mike Briggs.
I second it.
yeah, with that, I'll make the or you might make the
did
nomination
you-
to close.
I move to close the nomination.
Let's vote on it. Terry,
Yes,
Val,
Yes.
Mike is a yes,
Yes.
and Mike accepts it too.
Okay. Good to go. We got new officers.
All right.
Same.
Congratulations.
yes, all of you.
Thanks.
You want to approve of the minutes from November 9th meeting?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
Terry? You approve?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Okay, so I was not here, so,
you can still vote to approve.
okay, I approve then too, so,
You can vote to approve or disapprove. Okay,
Yes.
yep. Minutes are approved.
all right.
You want to talk about short-term rentals?
We're
I
all done-
would.
We're all done with the septic then, right?
Yep.
For now, okay.
And so we've decided then that that'll be an agenda item for discussion of everyone's review at the next meeting. Is that correct?
For the septic
For the
systems,
septic,
Yes.
yes.
All right, good.
The short-term rentals, same thing. Dave Udy didn't feel a lot of pressure on that. We could treat it like the septic and kind of kick around some of the stuff. In talking with Jason, the township and Dave really hasn't had that many complaints about the rentals. There is quite a few of them in the area. If you go on Venmo or Airbnb and just look at the map that they put on their site, and they got all the bubbles, showing the location of different rentals. I just counted the bubbles and came up with basically Gerrish Township has somewhere between 75 and maybe as much as 100. It's hard to do. It's not the easiest. So it's not scientific, let's put it that way. Lyon Township had about the same, about 70 to 90. So the whole areas, might have a couple hundred. You got to watch that site, those sites, because on the bottom, they'll say there's 300 listings, but many of them are duplicated. They're being listed 3 different ways. So the real question is there a need for the ordinance? Or has it been policing themselves? Did a little census work, and there's, according to the 2020 estimated census, there was 1,280 occupied housing units in Gerrish Township. Total housing units is 3,392. 96% are owner occupied. And then I got a whole laundry list of years that were built based on probably permits and so forth. this information will be handy for the septic system and the rental if we choose to go down that road. What I found was looking at other townships on their rental programs. I think it was East Bay Township in Traverse City. They limit, and the Acme one, I think, limit the amount of permits they allow. 145 was kind of like the average that they would allow to be permitted and occupied. So I thought that was kind of interesting. The licenses became kind of a lottery thing, I think. I don't know how they did it. Some of the rentals or the ordinances have two classifications. They have what they call a tourist home and a vacation home. A tourist home is the difference is the owner of the property lives there. They're renting out a part of their home, or they're renting out a building on their property, and they're present to manage it. A vacation home typically is just that. It's a vacant house until somebody rents it. So there's all kinds of nuances is what I'm trying to get to on this thing also, kind of like the septic stuff, or like any ordinance, I should say. And there'd be some serious investment to create all the permits and requirements and all that sort of thing by the township to instigate or start this program. So, you know, back to you, Mike, when you were talking to Dave, I talked to him also and got the same impression. He's not, you know, okay, you want to work on it a little bit, have some stuff, again, just to help the board decide if it's something they really want to go at. So that's what I was thinking I'd do with that, is just put together some stuff and try and put a budget on it and leave it at that. I don't know if you all know, but Dave is leaving the township as supervisor. He's planning on stepping down, I think, in March. He's been talking to Brian Hill about replacing him, appointing him for the rest of his term. So I don't know if Terry, if you have anything you want to add to that, but I just thought we might as well get it out there so make sure everybody knows about it.
Yeah, he was
Because
gonna
I think a lot of this, we won't want to really push on it until the transfer and, you know, and the board is stable, comfortable, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, he was going to announce that at last Tuesday's board meeting, but that was canceled. So we're having the board meeting this coming Tuesday. And then he was going to wait till the February meeting initially to say who you thought we should appoint. But he said, well, I might as well get it out in the open now. So that's where we stand.
Okay.
I have a quick question for you, Tom, on this Article 3, is it tourist home? And it says 50 application on 3.4 section D. Okay.
Okay.
Then you go to section 4, vacation home. And the same thing under 4.3, you've got 50 permits. So does that mean 100, or does that 50 for both of them? Since they're two different classifications.
Yeah, I think it's each classification. That's
So
how
there
I
could be
interpret it.
So there would be 100 then.
Right.
Okay.
Total, is that what you're getting at?
Yes, yes.
Right, like you would add them together if you want to get a total.
Okay.
And Tom, I think one of the things that you alluded to was that there were some discussion or maybe some thought that we didn't need to do anything about that right now. I also believe that if we wanted to do something that had to do with limiting licenses or whatever we call it, permits, that we probably want to get ahead of it. Because if we wanted to have, for instance, a total of 100 permits to do this, and we got to the point where there are already 150 people doing it, then it would be a lot more difficult to get to that number. And secondly, I think there are some cases, law cases that are involved with like grandfathered type things, whereas if the municipal authority doesn't create something prior to certain people already establishing that they're not required to have a permit, so to speak. So, I think that's one of the reasons that we should look at it as seriously as we may, in order to determine whether or not this is something, if we want to go forward with it, but we want to use so we don't get behind.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've read something to that effect about being grandfathered in and that sort of thing, but I can't remember the nuts and bolts of it at the moment. Well, what's everybody think? Do you want to work on this at the same time as the septic? I sent you a sample. There's other ordinances out there that are, I mean, there's an ordinance, Torch Lake. Their short-term rental thing. What'd they do? I lost my train of thought. Oh, no, I'm mixing it up. Torch Lake, I'll drop back and explain. It's the septic system. They actually have a clause in there that at time of transfer, real estate transaction, it automatically has to be inspected and all that sort of thing. So nothing to do with what we're doing now, but I got the two mixed up. But yeah, I mean, you can look at the short-term rental documents that I sent you that Markey did, I think it was, and I think Roscommon Township. They're 3 pages. These other things are 7 pages, so it's really the detail and how you want to go about it. You want to have 2 classifications, because the big rub, I think, was if there was a problem, they wanted to be able to get a hold of whoever's responsible. And that's basically what the licensing does. It puts somebody on call 24 hours a day. If there's an issue, you're going to get a call to deal with it. And so, yeah, I'm fine with that. If you want to do what we're doing with the septic system, just.
Yeah. One of the things that we might do research wise is actually talk to people at Markey Township. Now they've had this in operation for a year, I believe, or at least most of the season. And maybe they can give us some insight as to what things within their boundaries of their ordinance seem to be working well, and what things they may think to tweak a little. And then if we had that information, we could consider that as part of our decision down the road.
Okay. Yeah, sure. We can reach out to them and
Yeah,
see how it's working.
one of the other things I was looking at with the examples, they seem to have, it looks like maybe a little more restrictive stuff on like when you're talking to noise or the type of activities or something like that for the short-term rentals. And the question I have on that, and I think it's going to be probably an issue, is when you're talking things like that, whether, I don't know if you can really you could maybe set an ordinance, but I don't know what the legalities are, is being consistent with, the other people that are like next door that may, own the stuff that don't have a rental, but are actually, more gregarious or, outgoing. But the point there is that we have ordinances and noise ordinances and other stuff that deals with the activities and behavior that people are automatically held to. And so I don't know if you can actually statutorily, I guess you could say from a legal perspective, put limitations on that on a rental place, that's right next to other places in there when you got people that are doing the same thing. It may be possible, but that's an area that I see as a definite
Yeah, all those kind of activities are, whether it's noise, being a nuisance or not, are subjective. I mean,
Right, and they're also a help. I mean, we have the ordinances out there for the township for anybody regardless right now, whether they're in a rental or not. So I would think, I mean, that's stuff that you have things that exist. It just, they need to be enforced. And the problem there, I would also surmise that, from the law, the police officers and stuff, that there's only so many officers that exist and only so many, things they can handle at, one time. So some of the stuff, I don't know how many things they get in, if they get it at all, that they aren't able to respond to. But if you get, some ordinance like this and a lot more restrictive stuff, again, you're talking a lot more potential issues coming up. And then people start doing it and then they do it for vindictiveness or whatever, or they're more where they let things go before. And then all of a sudden you get inundated with responding these calls all the time. It takes away from elsewhere. So I just point that out as a potential,
Yeah, I know there's a police ordinance for noise and
Right,
I
and all
don't have
that.
it here, so I'd have to check it. It may be redundant. Like
I mean, the thing you get with a lot of the short-term stuff is, or with anybody, people that come up here now, there's been a change just in the last, I mean, it's a continual change, from before I was born to now, kind of a steady slope. But, now is every 20 years is kind of like a rollout or turnover of people. And with that, the houses expand, the dots expands, the boats expands. And then those people like they're coming up. It's a different social mindset where they're more, work hard, play hard kind of a thing. So they're coming up and not coming up necessarily to want to be in the quiet areas and just sit down and chill out. And so with that, even now you get more people that are trying to, just the regular residents that are more, different mindset than what people that were 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
I think a lot of if you read that ordinance, all of them stress that the owner of the rental, or they require through that ordinance that all these rules and things are, published. They're written down, they're in the rental, and almost the renter has to sign that they read it, type thing. So they're very trying to be real proactive and lay down the law before they get going. How big of a problem is it? Like I said, we really haven't had a lot of complaints in the last couple of years. That nobody's really saying it's a real issue at the moment. But you know how it is, you get one or two and then it feels like everybody's doing it. So
Right. But I also think it's kind of ramping up right now where, and it started after COVID, because what else in the real estate market, then people were looking to buy places just literally. I mean, you had the internet that helped proliferate the advertisement stuff for it. And then you had the cost and the housing and all that stuff as a money making thing. So a lot of those things we had in my neighborhood, Old Point Comfort area, we had 3 within, 50 yards, a couple of properties of my house and several different sides that started this year. And so there's been a steady increase each year, and I expect it to be only go more so unless the whole economy.
On my street, I mean, the last 10 years, I think like 4 houses were sold. Last year, 3 were sold. Last year.
Yeah, in our place back
And
there, every house from you.
And every single one of them is a short-term rental now.
Yeah, and some people are, and it's also causing a problem just with housing availability, because people are then outpriced. They're buying them for investment stuff and outpricing people that were wanted to move here permanently, with the lower income stuff. And then 2, for people that were intending to use them themselves. So it's a different thing. And I just say that because it hasn't been as much an issue in the past, but it seems like just in the last couple of years, there's been a ramp up. And if that continues, there's going to be a point where all of a sudden
Wait.
Yeah.
To jump
So
in.
Mike, I take it that, well, the whole board, do we want to treat it like we're doing the septic thing, like Greg just said, start putting something together, at least the parts that'll take a lot more thought than just the basic ordinance?
Yeah, I would.
Put it in our back pocket if we need it.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, do that. And I mean, denote, here's the issues, and then here's potential options that people have done or that we could, maybe look at doing ourselves, but not necessarily putting, okay, here's the exact wording we want.
So
Okay, well, let's,
but how do we want to do that? I mean, do we want to do that in conjunction? I mean, two things at the same time? Do we want to split?
If you start talking reality here with people, we're down a person already. We got 2 people in Florida. We got a new, yeah, but I mean.
They're
they
not
could-
excluding themselves. So
Right. But the point here is we got 4 site plans potentially coming up.
Mhm.
And we got a new supervisor then, in the next couple months potentially. So I would say that, and this is what I talked, what's the expectations for how long the meetings go? Is it something that if you get 5 site plans or 4 site plans, are you obligated to put them all on there and meet till 3 a.m? Or is it you prioritize stuff here? So, what's a standard board meeting? And Dave Udi's, come back essentially, you put down in the calendar what you think you do and what you put down, you do, whether it takes you to midnight or not. Now, I think it's one of these things that, maybe we do 2 site plans at most and some other agenda, but that being some of the, when you do the site plans, preliminary is more intensive. And then some of the final things, there could be some follow-up stuff. So those could go fairly quickly, but I would say that I would, tackle one, maybe for the next couple months, whether it be the septic or the rental one, pick one and then do the other one, maybe a few months later, not try and do them both here right now with the,
Mike, I thought we already broke up like those 2 things to have certain people, like small committees responsible to work out some of those other details. I don't think we have to
Yeah.
not.
Well, if
we
it's-
didn't formalize it, Greg,
Well-
to your point, because I think last meeting, that's what we were talking about.
I mean, you're right. Some of the stuff is going on behind the scenes. So you're going to be doing it, but I'm just, if you're talking stuff like doing drafts and rewrites and going back and forth with,
I don't
with.
think we're at that stage, Mike. Not
Yeah,
yet.
okay. Yeah, and
I
that's
think
why
it's more just identify stuff. If you take the time, spend a couple hours, just go through the ordinances and mark up the things that you think need looked at. Kind
I
of like
don't have
what
a
Greg was
problem.
saying.
Yeah, we don't need to spend hours. I like stuff.
I can't hear you.
I said we could spend like 20 minutes or something on the septic, another 20 minutes. The rest-
Sounds like your mic might not be on, Mike.
Shows red.
No, it's the button at the bottom. It should be green.
It's
What I was saying was, we
There
could
you are.
spend like 20 minutes on the septic for a meeting, and another 20 minutes on the rental. It's kind of a time limit on it, but I think we should talk about both.
Yeah, well, the meetings are one thing, but then the primary thing is the work you do behind there. And I'm just looking at, to me, doing the minutes and doing, summing up site plan things, and those are fairly intensive stuff. That I'm primarily doing. And then there's annual report and there's other things that are time intensive. A lot of hours go into putting that stuff together beforehand. And that's where the main thing, focuses and that I'm concerned about is the additional work that you're doing after hours on there.
Well, I would make the suggestion that the site plans, that stuff's priority. That's a service that we said we provide, and they become ordinances that we would maybe like to have and so forth. That's going to take a back seat to it. But I think we can be working on them in the background a little bit. So if push comes to shove, I'd say the site plans will take precedence.
Yeah, couldn't we have it as time permitted to work on the, put on the agenda, time permitted to discuss the septic and the rentals?
Yeah. It's funny, it all depends on how involved you want to get. If you're having, doing the research and having meetings, a lot of sub meetings, before that, that's the issue. my main concern is the additional hours after you're spending on it, how much time are you really doing? And, you know, we split stuff up and
Well, if I'm doing the agenda, like at next month's meeting, you know, the site plan will be at the top of the agenda. If it takes up most of the meeting, then we just have to push the other ones back to the next meeting, you know? So we can leave them on the agenda, but if we get to them, fine. If we don't, we don't.
I
But
do agree, though, the rental is a growing and growing thing. I mean,
Yeah.
in my sub alone, the house goes up for sale. 6 people want to buy it, but they all want to use it for short-term rentals.
Every single one.
I mean, it's just incredible how many. Now, luckily, we don't have short-term rentals in our association. I'm in Dave Udy's association. And I'm on the board there, but it's growing and growing. So I think we should look at it.
okay,
I did go, Tom, I did go, like, if you don't mind, I would like to kind of bring up a couple points. I mean, I went over your sample, short-term rental, ordinance. First of all, I think like it's very important for us to understand how we're going to enforce, what is the enforcement process gonna look like? Because I think it's also, Jason mentioned that, from his perspective, you know, it was mainly like for the permitting, from the permitting perspective, but, you know, it's the same thing, like, you know, how we're going to enforce it. Then, permit limit, I think, Greg, you mentioned that. We have to have a very good explanation. What is the criteria? If we're gonna put the limit on the permits, on the amount of permits, we have to have a very rock solid explanation, you know, what is the criteria? Why we decided like to have like 100 permits, or what is the limit? So not just because we just came up with a number. So
You could come up with a percentage
Either-
of the homes
Mhm.
in Gerrish. Right? And we won't allow any more than this certain percentage
Mhm.
to be rental, something like that.
Right. So like, as long as like we have a good criteria,
Mhm.
like why, you know, not just, you know, like, because we like the number 80, or we like the
Exactly.
number
A
100.
and we could do research to say what other cities or townships have
Yep.
and kind of go with.
Then another thing, like, you know, so revocation. So we need to provide more explanation, you know, how we're going to revoke, but also like, you know, we need to kind of outline the process, what the owner, you know, would have to do, if he or she wants to appeal the revoke license. Then maximum occupancy. We need to include the details how these limits will be enforced. It kind of interferes, I mean, or kind of goes back to the how we're going to enforce this, but also like, you know, what is the maximum occupancy, and who will be counting, you know, the people that are staying there. Then noise restriction. Actually, I think Greg, you mentioned that. Also probably like, you know, just put the limit in decibels. Like, I mean, it's very common practice, like, you know, in the construction or in the operation. So what is the limit? What amount of noise you can do? Like, not only like, you know, 11 till 7 o'clock in the morning, noise restriction, but also like, you know, outline what is the decibel value for the noise restriction. Then I
Yeah, like a
made,
quiet time.
right. Parking, another thing, like what it says designated parking space. So I think like we need to provide the explanation what constitutes a designated parking space, and how parking violations will be addressed. And I think also in the sample that you sent, it was also the advertising restrictions. So we just need to also maybe outline a little bit more detail, provide more details, you know, how, you know, what the penalties would be for the violation or for the violations. So these are like kind of, you know, a few highlights, a few things I highlighted when I read, when I went over the sample ordinance you distributed.
Most of the items you identified have been addressed in some shape or form in that sample ordinance. So those things that you've identified, I would, you know, go through that ordinance, read it carefully, and see if you agree the way they're handling it, or if you think we need to do more or less to those points. I know the one that, like the permits, when they exceed, the applications exceed the amount of permits, they're basically going, if you already have a license and you're in good standing, you get renewed. And if there still is more people wanting a license, they use a lottery system. So pretty much everything you identified is in there. There might be a couple things that are missing, but I agree with you. Those are all things that we need to be aware of, and you know, if what's in that ordinance looks good, I'm all for copying it.
Right.
You know, hey, I don't need to reinvent the wheel here. It's hard enough.
Plagiarism is the best creativity.
But it's all
Right.
possible and legal. One of the things I also want is that should also look at, you know, for the things you discussed, like parking and the max occupancy and some of that stuff is, you know, technically the ordinance, I think there's some of that stuff is addressed in the regular ordinances. And some of that I would, and even, you know, there are people that may actually, a lot of local residents that are exceeding that now, whether or not they're renting the stuff out. And if they are, there's also a lot that do it, that they're less intrusive even in doing so than others are that have less stuff. So there's some things that a can of worms can be opened, or when you put this stuff down again, it's like some of the statute stuff to say, okay, you can be allowed in this house, you know, a regular resident after 12 o'clock, within a certain reason, but you can't be in this house, you know, because it's rented out there at 11 o'clock. I mean, it'd be no different. The person who owned it was there. So those are I just throw those things out. Just, we should, you know, look at that stuff too, and then consider some of that stuff. And then some of the question we go ask is, what are those things that, you know, with the police department or, you know, for the enforcement stuff, how are they handling the current stuff right now? And a lot of it, because I mean, you just look with the parking, just, you know, just to get into the state park and, you know, boat launches and road ends. And that's been a really ever growing issue. You know, for stuff that were people, they could sit all day, you know, marking tickets out and they don't necessarily, you know, answer or there's a lot of stuff that they just don't enforce right now, I think, out of sheer numbers. And
Well, I think we've covered this pretty good. I'll say one other thing. East Bay Township, they issue around 45 licenses, and they charge $400 each. So their revenue stream is about $58,000. Just to throw that out there for your information. I'll write it up when I submit my notes and stuff. But I don't know. You want to move on to the mobile home item?
Let's move on.
Well, my research on that was, or my thoughts are on that is, you know, Jason would like, or the township would like to limit how old of a mobile home could be set in And basically, this isn't in the parks, this is on individual lots. And 20 years was the number that we were talking about. I researched it, and the life expectancy of that product is anywhere from 30 to 80, 100 years. Basically, it's all relevant to how well it's maintained. You know, if the roof leaks and water gets in there, the floor is going to rot out because the floor is typically particle board, that type of thing. The water heater leaks. Those are the kind of damages you see typically, other than just abuse or wear and tear. My thought was anything older than 20 years would require a home inspector, a third-party inspector, not Jason, but a third-party inspector to go in there and do a complete inspection of it. And that would be paid by the owner to evaluate it and have the the township have the authority to require that these repairs be made in the name of health, safety, and welfare of the public. I think that could possibly work. So thoughts?
Your suggestion is to perform like a full safety inspection.
Can't hear you.
Well, can you hear me now?
Get a little closer to the microphone if it's on.
Oh,
I
I don't
think his
hear you.
battery went dead. We won't have to worry how long the meetings are because the batteries will go dead.
That's right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So your suggestion is to perform the full-blown safety inspection by the third party, right?
Yeah, I guess I didn't hear what your first part was.
No, your suggestion is to require a safety inspection.
Well, it'd be a home inspection. They're going to check to make sure there's no leaks in the plumbing and the heating system works. There's no leaks there. Basically, it's a system-wide check, make sure all the electrical's functioning, GFIs for safety. Like I said, the heating system is working. There's not a leak in the heat exchanger and stuff like that. The issue is you're saying we're basically, the problem I see is, when does the inspection incur? They bring it in, set it, it gets connected, it's basically installed, then you go in and inspect it, and any deficiencies have to be repaired or upgraded.
Addressed. Mhm.
I guess upgraded is the wrong word, but repaired, and before you get a certificate of occupancy.
Mhm.
And that's no different than a normal house when it's built. You build a house, you get everything done, building inspector comes through and makes the final inspection, and you either pass or fail. And it's plumbing, heating, electrical. So to me, it's just falling in the same category when they're 20 years old. If they're newer than that,
This was my suggestion.
you
Tom,
can
I'm
be
sorry.
exempt.
Yeah,
And
Tom,
would
I mean,
the
this
same
is-
people that do home inspections be able to do these?
Yes.
this is essentially exactly what I have suggested. I don't know, back in October, September, when we had it first came up, and for some reason, I think either Jason pushed back on that. He's for some reason, like, we didn't get the traction on this topic.
That's because he didn't want to be the inspector.
Right.
That's why.
But I mean, then my suggestion was, like, because it's also a very common practice that the inspections would be performed by third-party vendor.
Well, hey, that's where I got the idea, was from you.
I do think that putting out some age limit on it is also a good idea though, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like 30 years is max.
What if you have a 50-year-old mobile home, which is in outstanding condition? It looks like brand new.
I'm just saying it'd be our responsibility if we wanted to put an age limit in that. It's not, I don't think it's a bad idea. Just my
Yeah.
thoughts.
But if you're, that's the case, I think when you're getting to the actual home, you look at the individual items and if they pass that,
Mhm.
then regardless whether it's 2 years or 100 years old.
Can we have both? Can we have age restriction, but then you have an exception, let's say, like, if in case, let's say if the age limit is 20, but then if you pass the inspection, then
And but in that case, you would, if you pass the inspection, then you pass the inspection, you would, the age would be regardless. That's something that's, I mean, we're not going to decide an age, thing right tonight.
Just throwing it out.
right.
Yeah. I think you could put out there, but again, it's still like a car or something like that. Wear and tear depends upon the people that are using it and how well they take care of it. And if you bring something in that's, 75 years old in mint condition, I mean, our concern is that it's safe.
Right.
And, looks good or,
Exactly.
which with that, and so you look at the items
But
and
we're not saying about appeal, we're just saying it passes inspection. It could look terrible, but still pass the inspection. That's all I'm saying too.
I
is
think the
it-
important thing to talk about is just like, we could ask that inspections be mandatory after certain ages. But if they pass the inspection and they look like they're in good shape, then I don't think we should age limit them out. The inspection itself will tell us whether they're in shape to continue, right?
but I think what you're talking, or when I made that comment about what they look like, it was just kind of a generic thing. And I think you're referring to, yeah, if this thing looks, it's painted up, it's psychedelic and, rotted or again, that's all in the eye of the beholder, subjective too. So if you got to have some criteria that you have definitive standards. And if they meet those standards, that's quantifiable.
Hey,
that's
hey,
subjective.
Tom,
Yeah.
have they changed those building codes in the last 15 or 20 years for mobile homes?
They're changing right now. But the changes are mainly energy efficiency. They're making them put more insulation in them and, better windows, that kind of thing. So yeah, the standards are changing. They're just being implemented, or they just got passed in the last.
The reason
couple
I
months.
asked is, Dave and I met with Scott Hess yesterday or the day before, and we talked about this, and it came up. What about if we say they have to meet today's building codes?
Well, to me, that would be wrong, because you could make that claim on any house. That was, if your house is 10 years old, you're not meeting today's building codes. Well, I take that back. In Michigan, you are, because we haven't changed our building codes in over 10 years. We're way behind on that. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was just an idea, a thought that, bring them all up to standard, but maybe.
I mean,
that's
really,
nothing.
all you're looking for is you want it to be safe, livable, habitable, dry, not rotten and falling down. And because what you're getting is, I think the problem is you got a person in the township that's bringing in older mobile homes and setting them up and not fixing them up.
And then just renting them out.
I think by having this clause in there, if I was going to buy one on the used market, I'm going to inspect it a lot closer to know what repairs it needs, to know what my costs are actually going to be. So it might just deter people from bringing in older homes, that are beyond 20, 30 years.
Okay.
If they're smart, they're going to check the zoning and requirements before. Because Jason said he's turned one down right now because he requires drawings from the manufacturer on foundational supports and tie downs and so forth. And this model's so old, the manufacturer doesn't have any, you can't get any paperwork on it explaining all that. So Jason's denied the permit and it's sitting there empty right now. So that's kind of some of the backstory on this whole question. We don't have to act on this now, but it was on the agenda. I just wanted to bring it up. You can kick it around a bit and we can deal with it next meeting. It's nothing,
I think, Tom, one of the things, like, I mean, you actually spelled out in the agenda, obviously, the age of, we can go with both age and inspection. I mean, the way you spelled out in the agenda, require full inspection if older than 20 years old.
right.
That's fine with me too.
So we can have, like, 20 years, 20 years old or newer will be like a light inspection.
Well, one of the, it's my understanding, I think with the gas companies now, because I've actually got a couple places that are, the gas hookup is out and they need to do that. But they said, if you haven't had the hookup within like 6 months, that they can't, they won't do the hookup unless the whole place is brought up to code.
I didn't catch
said-
that, Mike.
And I don't know that, my understanding is that the gas company up here says now, if your gas has been disconnected for over like 6 months or some period, that in order to hook it back up, the whole place has to be brought up to code. Now, I don't know I haven't seen that in writing. I don't know if that entails, that means all electric, all plumbing, all everything else, or just the gas lines itself. But if it is one of those things where you have to bring it up to code, then that's something that supports a consistency of, a certain age thing, that you got to bring everything up to code, whereas plumbing, electric, and all the other, building codes that, go along with it.
I think it's kind of speculative as to whether there's anything in writing about what you're suggesting, Mike. So I don't think it should be part of our discussion until we know for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. And that's why they brought it up further.
Any other discussion on this?
No.
Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to do anything with it or run it by Jason again to see what he thinks, or?
Yeah, we should run it by Jason. I think we should definitely do something with this though.
I think at least, we have, it looks like we have more support for inspection by the third party. So,
And then,
I kind of with the combination of age and inspection, and discuss that with Jason and then finalize this topic.
Okay, I'll get with Jason. If he's on board, we'll get something written up and present it at our next meeting. And if it looks good, we can approve it then.
yeah, I think we should do something for sure.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's great.
spring's coming, and there's gonna be a influx, I'm sure.
There'll be short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And an old septic system,
If there is one.
the trifecta.
Exactly. Okay, moving on then to new business. Review the Kimmerer proposed storage building site development plan.
Hey, did Jason leave you guys a big print?
No, no, he didn't, or at least we don't see one in here.
No,
He wasn't here when we got here.
Yeah, I forgot to tell him to do that. And
Yeah, one of the things I was wondering is, we told the people that, we needed their stuff 2 weeks ahead of time. And they weren't going to be doing, the reviews. So the question I have here is, how extensive are you talking about for this section, for looking at just like skimming over, or are you talking, trying to go through the checklist?
well, what I'm saying is, if we could identify, obviously that site plan they submitted isn't hardly worth the paper it's on. I think what he's looking for is, here's the buildings I'm thinking of doing. Here's the dimensions and stuff. So I think before they get into the water issues and all the other stuff, what do you think of my general location and sizes? You know, the front of it, they've got basically they're 150 feet back from the road to the front of the buildings, drawing an arc on that curve. So they've really set the whole complex to the back of the property as much as he could. Two things that I'm concerned with is the building to the south, the longest building there, you know, his setback is 9 feet. That's the minimum. But that building's 40 feet wide, and I don't remember how many 100 feet long. So to me, there's a water issue coming off of that roof. I'm assuming he's going to shed the water to the back of the building, which would be the property line. And I think he needs to understand that all his water that they collect on that property needs to stay on that property. So they might need a retention pond, just like Sorora did. So they might have to increase that setback, you know, 5 feet or more, because I think we need a landscape buffer along that line too, to recognize that there is a vacant piece of property on that south line. And really the same goes for the north building, the north property line. They've got a little more room to work with there, but it's still got the same issue a bit. The rear of the buildings, they actually have a driveway, you know, wrapping around the building, so you can drive all the way around the middle buildings. That setback, you know, they're 30-some feet. I don't see that being a real issue. So I think, you know, if we could discuss at this meeting those points that I just brought up and give them the message that this is what we're looking at, or we don't really like on your plan, or that you need to consider. And then I think it was Mike or brought up snow storage, or Greg or somebody, I can't remember. And, you know, so those basic things that they need to be aware of initially anyway, to get the ball rolling, because, and tell them they need to look at that checklist, because we need to hear from the road commission, the fire department, and all that other stuff, right?
Yeah, because it's a 540 feet is the length of the building.
I got to pull it up. Hang on a minute.
540, and then the width is 40. They have a 9-foot setback on the south end. That's it.
Pretty hard for me to read mine because the type is so small and the pictures are small.
Yeah, I got to zoom in like crazy, close the tools. But you see what I'm talking about? That building to the south there, that's
Yeah.
500 and
540.
yeah. To me, that building needs to move back from the property line in order to accommodate drainage, or, you know, they need to come up with something. And I think that needs to be landscaped for that whole line there. Some kind of buffer. I mean, you did that for even Dollar General, I think, didn't you?
There's a thing in the ordinance where you're supposed to have a buffer of the natural trees that are there.
Right.
And
So
stuff.
I think that's what I'm saying. If we can bring their attention to these things in general, and then get the ball rolling on a real plan. But I think that's what they're looking for at this level. You know, I'd like to have identified what areas are going to be cleared, what trees and stuff they plan on saving, and so we can get an idea of the impact. I do give them credit, like I say, for the front, you know, having that parking area, and that parking area is at least 50 feet back from the road right away. You know, I mean, the front setback requirement's 45. And just looking at it, it looks like there's at least another 5 or 10 feet there, maybe 20. So if they can maintain that front buffer, that could go a long way to making this look pretty hidden.
The fire chief just commented that, they're only allowed to build a 12,000 square foot building. So,
And this one is 21,000.
Or it has to be sprinkled.
or it has to be, has a sprinkler system in it.
We can't hear Jim at all. Maybe if he has some comments, he could come up to the
He's
table.
coming up to the
Going
table.
up.
Yeah, bring him right up and I didn't know he was even there.
Yeah,
Jim.
hi, Jim.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. So similar to the building that they're building to the southeast of there, the other one that's 48,000 square feet. If anything's over 12,000 square feet for this kind of construction, it has to be sprinkled or it has to be separated by fire break walls. So if it's 21,000 square feet, it's got to be a firewall in there somewhere to separate it down to 12,000 square feet or sprinkled.
Good to know.
What's the setback off the road that close to the corner? I think it's 150 feet.
Where are you asking now?
So the building's close to the major intersection with the new standards. Doesn't that have to be 150 feet back, setback on that?
No, it doesn't.
That's what Jason was telling me.
It is 150 feet on their plan.
Okay, good. Does that include the parking lot?
No,
Just a setback.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
hey, Jim, we'll, if you want a copy of this, you can easily get one from Jason.
yeah. Yeah, no problem. Jason will share it with me.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for your input. So those are the kind of things they need to know now.
Actually, out of three, 4 buildings, three are exceeding 12,000 square feet. Even the smallest one, actually all of them, even the smallest one is 12,800. So if you look, if you guys can zoom in, even the smallest building is 12,800 square feet. So that would apply this principle to apply to all buildings.
So there's three major issues right now. It's water runoff, snow removal, and then fire.
Fire code.
Yeah, fire code. Those three major issues right now.
Well, and then water collection. you
Right,
know.
water, yep. Water runoff, yep. Water runoff collection.
Did we require anything
But snow removal.
for fire? A hydrant or anything? We didn't do anything like that. No.
Jim's coming up.
Why don't you just stay there?
Yeah, just stay there, Jim.
At this site, we're not gonna require anything like we did at the previous site, which was a 25,000 gallon tank in the ground there. Because we had no other water source in that area. And since that was the first building built there like that, we required it there. Since this one's there, we do not need to have it at the adjacent buildings.
Good information.
Okay.
Anything else on your end you would see being negative?
From the fire department end, I would want to make sure, what I looked at
The
those
exits.
plans earlier, I'd want to make sure that we can get the trucks around those buildings adequately. And I think there's only 25 feet between some of those buildings. Some of my concerns would be the close proximity, but also how are they gonna back stuff into any of those? Or are they just gonna pull up to them and unload trucks from the side or whatever? It's pretty tight.
I would think we'd need to know how it was gonna be secured too, whether there's gonna be a gate or some access if we needed to get to that?
Exactly, and the gate, if there is a gate, needs to be far enough off the road, so if somebody's pulling in there with a trailer, that they can get far enough off the road before the gate, they can open the gate, so that they're not out in the road.
Good.
About snow removal. I mean, the same thing, like, we have a water runoff collector.
You gotta have spot, yeah, for the snow to go. Like last building we approved didn't have that, and we made them have it, so same thing here.
Yep.
Those four things for sure.
Hey, Jim?
Yeah.
As soon as you get a chance, take a look at that and see if you think you can maneuver if you've got enough room to maneuver the trucks around the back end of those buildings. I think you do, but that'd be a good thing to know so we can tell them if they need to shrink a building down or, relocate it, that type of thing. Or just tell us what you want to see, or what the minimum is.
Okay, yeah, I'll look at it and look at that in particular, and then I haven't really studied them that close. I just glanced at them today with Jason. So I'll take a good look at them and see if there's anything else that concerns me as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Tom, one thing. I've had some negative responses for another storage unit there. And it's been brought up, can we put a moratorium on this until we see how the first units go? I know Roscommon Township did it, and we talked to Hesh yesterday about that. And he said, if you want to put a moratorium on there, you can. It's up to your discretion. And I guess we're just concerned about they build this new one, is it going to sit empty? Or, what's really going to happen? We have nothing to base it on. And so I guess my feeling is I'd like to just put it on pause for a little bit to see what happens.
Right. And one of the things I asked Dave Udi about last week as well, and I've expressed my opinions and other things that it concerns that we have to be cautious here because all of a sudden, we did a rezoning without the expectation of a lot of this, the excessive numbers coming in, even for the current one that's been approved. And this is a C1, which requires special use. And I'm not so sure that just because they come through and even if they meet the criteria that the board is actually obligated to approve it. In reference with the master plan and, stuff being supportive mainly to the Gerrish Township folks immediately for C1. But one of the questions I have is we have a huge area right now that's being built. And then that was essentially almost double than the current capacity of the whole township. And now we have something that's going to triple that with potential 3 other site plans for many storage units on top of that, on C1 stuff in large areas. You're talking 30,000 square feet or something like that of, properties and stuff when you put those 3 contiguous ones together and elsewhere. So Dave was saying, if you got questions that for the legal stuff that maybe we should ask is for us to come as a board to come up with a handful of questions. Like example, could you approve or could you disapprove a place if you thought it wasn't going to meet the township's needs to the place that's immediately being built? Or in here, you got a case where you've got 2 different people coming in and some sites at different locations. If you did that, could you approve other ones, on a handful on a different side of the lake? Or if you approve like this one here, they're talking about from this Saginaw at the place we're looking at right here, but they're also the one that's down the road. That's in that flagship. I forgot where it's on Markey or off Robinson Road. Anyways, what if we thought, well, we'd be, amenable to something over here at that place, but not over here. So what's the ramifications or potential legal things, whether or not it's warranted in their cases or our cases? Would there be possible complaints or lawsuits filed? if you said, yeah, we got too many over here, but we're willing to, allow it for this area. Um, and one person not, so I see potential problems if there is some disagreement. And I think the board, I think everybody's thinking you automatically have to approve these things. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. And that's why I'd like clarification from the legal standpoint, from our attorneys. And then Tom, you mentioned also that the MTA provides services, to offer advice and may even, have better, or more expertise and insight on something like these, particularly the zoning stuff than the attorney. So there may be two places to go, but I throw that out there and I'd like to at least, I'm not saying, you know, I may be the only one that feels this way and stuff. And, I do what the law says you got to do, but I'd like to get some clarification. Is it, if it came up or we didn't think, one or a couple of these things really meet, what we're looking for the township, can we say no without serious attribution?
So,
Hey, Terry, I'd like to know like what the negative points were that were brought up that would start us thinking that we want to put a moratorium on storage units.
just too many right now?
But in what way?
What do you mean by what way? Just there's too many units and you're gonna put 300 and some down there and then another 300 next to it.
Hey, you're clear cutting forest stuff for extra buildings. I think that's what a lot of the stuff is.
Well, if anybody wanted to develop the property, they'd probably want to cut some trees. But my point is, so are we saying that we would like to simply limit the amount of available storage units? Or is there a reason behind that we want to limit the amount of storage units based on some other environmental situation or some business that we're foreseeing in the future? Or what might the reasons be other than just we have a couple near there already?
The other thing would be, does it meet our master plan?
Hmm.
What we're looking at?
Well, that kind of is irrelevant at this point because we approved the rezone or the changing to allowing storage units in C1.
Right.
And when we did that, it was all reviewed with the master plan in mind. So we've already said that it fits the master plan.
Well, no, I disagree. Is when we reviewed it, we said we'd review each case individually.
Well,
And I
that's
think-
why it's a special use.
Yeah, and so, but was it the intent of when we approved those zones that we'd want every C1 area that was approved potential C1 for those buildings to be, mini storage units to go into all of them? The master plan specifically states in C1, you do not put up box stores like Walmart, and it actually says that in there. I equate personally the one that went in there that's going in now, it's a national organization and storage unit, and it's a huge facility compared to what we have with small scattered areas. That is like a box store. Now that could be, that's my opinion. That doesn't mean it's right, but
I don't know if there's ever been an economic study done on how much revenue that's going to turn to the township, but I would think that's one of the things maybe to be concerned about. But if in fact it did turn around good revenue to the township, I'm not so sure that we should be talking about that we have to limit how many of those particular types of businesses there are, because if the area requires it or seems to be able to utilize it, it's probably a good thing.
I agree with that too. I don't think you can just. They
well,
want to do
for
it.
I mean, you can argue too for that case that, yeah, we could benefit for having a Walmart or another box store up here in that area as well. And, the zoning was put, specifically to designate areas for that. Now, the question really remains, is the stuff that comes in there from that supports the township, is it going to be township people? Or is it going to be all, outside areas, from other townships, other counties? there's a thing with the local C1 is, it does offer or, support to, surrounding immediate areas if they're not in your township or the, surrounding county if they're close. But yeah,
That'd be a
about-
difficult question for us to answer though, wouldn't it, Mike?
it is difficult, but then again, right now with the example they just gave us, that is it Richfield or which township that just Dave Woody sent a thing out which y'all got CC'd on today. It was Roscommon Township's resolution for temporary moratorium on storage unit buildings. And it talks about, how many buildings were in there in the past, how many are coming up now. And it gives you a percentage of how many people are, how many storage units per resident in there, which is excessive on their numbers. So they're basically deferring for some further study. Now, I don't know that, we can define, a study ourselves, to the in-depth stuff that says how many people are actually going to be using it. in the
Yeah, secondly,
township.
we don't know exactly what their decision was made on, and there's what, I don't know how, what their business mix is already in Roscommon, or why that might be a
Yeah,
problem.
well, the point there is that they did say, hey, we've had an excessive number of units being built now. We've got some pushback from the community. And so we're gonna
Did they
table,
say that?
yes.
Did they have
Look,
pushback from the community?
Yeah, I do not see it here, but I have seen that and I believe it said that in the paper. The resorter in the last, I'm not sure which issue, but in the last couple months, there was something about that. And there was, some stuff talked about that. Now, they've just said, Terry, that there has been, some concerns already called in about the current place. And so I don't know what the community's results would be for us here against, if they're have the same concerns I do or not. But I bring it up. It's just if it came there and if you decide is there, you're talking another 1,000+ units put in on top, how many residents are there actually here? The two that are being proposed from the Saginaw thing are essentially, units to just for storage stuff like for housing. They're not necessarily to be conducive to, vehicles and recreational stuff that are more in tune to what this community is looking at. And the current one going in has time restrictions. The one that from Muskegon that's talking about, they're trying to meet that need and putting, something in there for storage units with 24/7 access, for vehicles and that kind of stuff. So on the surface there looks like they're trying to meet, and the other ones that I don't know if they're really concerned about the Gerrish Township market. They're coming from outside, and I look at that as being potential of, they're just trying to get a market period, regardless of whether it's Roscommon, Gerrish or not. And, the tax bases, that's a thing that, yeah, I can't dispute, stuff going in there, but you can, yeah, I don't know, but I bring that up as a concern and potential thing that we could run into down the road if you look at some of these places and you approve one and not the other, and now you got.
We did have the conversation, I mean, when we approved, storage units for C1, or when we supported that, we did have the conversation about, well, I mean, at one point, like, we will have to look and, I mean, are we still going to support new storage units to go into C1? Because the C1 has to support the direct needs of the residents. So if there's no direct need for the residents, and if right now, like, if we have like in C1s, if we have enough storage units for all the residents in Gerrish Township. Then.
Yeah, and I don't know if that number can be answered personally. Now, one of the things you could say is like, okay, you just forego asking a legal question that I'm proposing. Right now, do you present that to the attorneys? Or is just you go through and if they meet the criteria, that's fine. You make the recommendations to the board, township board, and say they have passed everything. And here's our recommendations. And the recommendations may include, some, for and some against in the rationale. And the township board has the ultimate, approval of those sites anyway. So you just say, I mean, you're essentially pushing it back. I'm just trying to be proactive and some stuff, not to say that you can't go ahead and do it or put it in there or review them. I'm just saying that if it came up later on and if you didn't do some of these things and all of a sudden you start saying yay for this one and nay for that one, there's got to be, justification. And if it's justification, well, it's not too, we've got too many. And if you let one go in, well, then you got to have criteria. How come you can let 500 in, but you can't let 600? Or why can't you let 500 of this guy's and 600 or 200 of this one's?
I don't know about what those actual numbers would be, but if it's sending revenue to the township and it's an area where where we still have area that we can accept commercial revenue, I'm not so sure we should be standing in front of that because we've got some others out there. If that's what the area is asking for, and those people who operate those businesses have to make those decisions, and we think that they're probably making it based on some plan or business model that they follow. I don't know that we should be stopping certain things because we've decided we've already got enough.
And you can always let stuff go in there. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to.
Right.
And I say right now, I argued about this before we made the zoning change, is that C1 area is probably the most valuable property we have here in this township. One of the most valuable as far as its location, proximity to the, two major interstates in the intersections. And right now, one of the biggest business models and stuff like that offers a return to the money is the storage unit facilities, I would say. And you're seeing an increased use of storage units. You're seeing an increased use of them also, whether it's legal or not, for as distribution centers, below the threshold of things. That's also arising. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's other opportunities. We've got a housing shortage. We've got other things about, stuff to support the recreational aspects. I don't have the money to put into it, but, it's something, I mean, that's an area like that is also something that's ripe. I think it's been somewhat, ruined with the current one that's gone up there. But if you took I'm just saying, for example, like a hotel stuff that's kind of in the context of the McMillan Center, where you got small detached cabins units that are rented out like hotels in a very, pristine, neat atmosphere around here. There's a need for that. Now, whether the market business model can be made for that, I don't know. And I don't have the money personally to put in for somebody, but there are things like that could exist if it's marketed and put it out there. Now, it could be several years down the road too. So yeah, it's a trade-off, and it's one of those things if, you're desperate for the money and you go for the short-term thing, that may be sufficient, but it also may cause more problems and detriment to the community in the long run.
Because to your point, I mean, we cannot really say does the community support an extra storage unit right now? Because I mean,
They don't know, and the reality is that people will not know and not voice an opposition until stuff goes up there when it's, oh my gosh, I didn't know it was going to be that.
Mhm.
And you have
because no, we just also approved. I mean, the storage units that we just approved, they haven't been built.
right.
So we will know the results. I mean, we will have a better understanding whether community needs additional storage units once the other storage units are either filled or they're sitting there empty.
But I don't think that's our decision to make. That's,
No, I mean,
No, it's not right.
Yeah, so for the immediate thing right here is anybody else in favor of sending some stuff up for legal opinion of could you approve or could you disapprove one, right next to lots you disapproved? Or you just say, we're not going to worry about that and just we approve whatever we get to approve that we feel it's within our standards and then make our recommendations to the board, township board, and they can deal with any approvals or disapprovals, using that bigger picture authority hat that takes into account aspects like the money and the financial stuff and all.
So Mike, what, if you distilled your question down to like 1 or 2 sentences, what would it be?
Yeah. Could we disapprove
Disapprove or
the place, or,
moratorium?
yeah, even if it meets the criteria of, all the technical specifications. The one question I have where I think it's a subjective about approving is that issue about, is it conducive to the township? Is it like a box store thing or is it too many? And is that taken away from some of the community aspects? So
So the question is, you want to know legally if we can disapprove something if somebody has to build it there. Is that right?
yeah, can you use that justification in the, from the township master plan, about the box store stuff for approving one area that, or just saying you say, can we deny some area just because we think there's actually too many other units that's being built or we want to hold off till later?
Well, I'd say, yeah, you could, but you gotta write up really clear, substantial reasons for it to substantiate it. You can't just say, gee, I think. That ain't gonna cut it.
Oh, I fully agree. And
Then I think you need to sit down and write it because you're all over the board there. We need to be right to the fine point of things if you want to go down that road. I'm telling you, that land has sat there for over 60, 70 years. We had an owner come in and tell you that he's been trying to get something in there for the last 50 when he owned it. It's zoned commercial. It's been zoned commercial. When we did the master plan, redid the zoning all those years ago, we went through all this and said, what would that be the best use for that? Well, it's near the interchange, just like you pointed out and stuff. It's a good commercial piece of property down the road. Well, guess what? The businesses aren't there to support that. The properties aren't really big enough for, like you say, a Walmart or anything. There is a need for storage because remember back when we had our other meetings on the other one, we had storage owners. I own storage. I had the guy from Point Comfort, and they all said, hey, we're full. We need more storage. I'd like to build more storage, but I don't have the room. This land fit the criteria perfectly because in the township, there's really not too many places where you could do a real storage development. I mean, I've got a small one. I've got 41 units. You're not going to get rich on 41 units. The reason you see such a big complex is because they need those numbers. That the one that's going in now, the Sawyer one's well over $1 million to install that thing and everything. And the return on that's going to take a while. I don't have a problem with this at all. I think they will fill up. They're going to, just like any business, they're going to take from some people. They might take from me, people that live out at the lake that are coming to town to store. They'll go where it's closest. I don't have a problem with it all. I think it's a well thought out project. It's big. Yeah, it's big. It needs to be big for the economic development end of it, from the financial end of it, for the developer. They need to get to this kind of size. Look at Scott's in Roscommon. He's in Crawford County. But yet, the argument of it's got to be just for the township people, that's silly. I mean, no business depends on I go to Walmart in Houghton Lake. I shouldn't go there because I don't live there and use that. Doesn't make any sense. Yes, the one that's going in now made a big impact. When you make that big of a clearing and stuff, sure. But when it's done, when the landscape, all the things we put in there to make it a nice project are implemented, I don't think you'll hear any complaints about it. It's going to be a nice looking project. And this one can be too. I'm not in favor of trying to come up with a moratorium and stuff. One of the reasons Roscommon Township did that is those developments were all occurring on 55. 55 is the main corridor. That's their economic bloodline. You go off of 55, nothing happens. And it's getting eaten up by that development. And they wanted to preserve some of that, I think, for more services for their residents that are more maybe a store, a business, retail type stuff. That's one of the reasons they got all freaked out a little bit. I do believe that government should not try to be an economist and try and figure out you shouldn't be picking winners and losers. I mean, if they put this in there and they go belly up, they go belly up. Somebody else will come along, buy it, and make it work. It's just the way economics go. The business I bought in Roscommon was dilapidated, sitting there. The owners didn't know how to manage it. The bank took it over. I bought it from the bank, and now I got a thriving business there. So you can't pick winners and losers. But I think we allowed for this development here, and we should follow through on it. Now, if you think there's too many units or the building's too big, okay, those are things we can work with the developer. We did that with the first one. Remember, he downsized it because he needed some storage for water and sewer, or not sewer, but snow and so forth. So I don't know. I hear your concerns, but I just don't see the
reasoning.
Uh,
I can't think of the word for it, but I just
The
don't
reason-
agree with you.
Yeah, I agree, Tom. Yeah. Any other discussions on this?
So I think we wrote down what we have,
Yes, we did. Yep.
four,
4 of them. Yep. Water runoff collection, fire codes, fire trucks turnaround, and snow removal. So snow removal storage.
so
Yeah, if you think of anything else, I think we should try and respond to them within, I don't know, what do you think? A week, 2 weeks? To give them time because they probably won't have enough time well, they might be able to get back to us before the next meeting, because I was thinking we should meet next month, but we wouldn't have to if we don't get more information from them or another site plan or something like that. So we could leave it in the air for right now, and I don't know. What do you think?
regardless of them, do we still want to have a meeting to discuss the short-term rentals and septic?
I would hold that off till the next one, but I mean, I think we need to have a meeting in February, because I think you'll get it here. You'll get this one, and you may get another site plan on top of that. One of the things that Jason said that, he's told that I think we need concur that he wants 2 weeks. He wants site plan submitted
2 weeks before.
for any of the reviews. He wants information 2 weeks prior to our board meeting.
Right.
And if we're all happy with that, I think that's fine. So, and then if there's, 3 or 4 that come in, there's the fourth one I'm referring to is the Jim's collision. They did a plan or a sketch plan, I think it was last year, recommended to go before the ZBA. They did. I was on the ZBA and we approved their variance if they decide to go ahead with their remod build. So that was one of the criteria they're going to have in order for their plans to be approved. So that's going to be another one. But if they come in, if there was, too much in the agenda, basically be a first come, first serve is what, Jason we were thinking about.
Okay.
So I would say 2 weeks notice, we get ahead of time, we can give these things to Jason and they can submit. I'm sure they'll be jumping on it right away and get something into us. by February.
Now we could,
Before we close this topic, I mean, because I mean, it looks like we have a, some division among us. I mean, economically, it does make 100% sense to move forward, but on the other side, we also have concerns that maybe we have too many storages in C1. Do we want to look at both options? So, I mean, we obviously we have we identified several items that we want to provide the feedback. But do we still want to look into options, potentially introduce moratorium for the storage units, get more backing for this idea?
Well, I don't get to vote as long as I'm here, but I wouldn't vote to have a moratorium.
You wouldn't?
I would not.
I would not either.
and I wouldn't either if I could vote. So, I mean, if you feel really passionate about it, you need to write it out why, and we can look at it and then make another decision. But as it stands right now, I'm not.
You need a
supporting
quorum
it.
to agree with that. We don't, and if I say no, then
You're not gonna see. So even if we three say,
well, I guess we
yeah.
three say yes.
Yeah, you can still vote the stuff. I mean,
You want to vote on it?
I'm not gonna play the game. Okay, we don't have the people here to do it. So, I mean, I was suggesting the moratorium was one issue. The get legal, advice was just another issue, and then stuff we can still, yeah, I'm not saying I'm gonna go ahead and, deny the stuff just out of principle and all that. I'm gonna look at stuff fair and do the things. I say my takeaway from here, and I think it's, at least more than half agreed that,
So-
they're probably, for it anyways, is just we go through the process, consider there, and if there's a recommendation to go to the main township board for it to be approved, then if there's any dissenting stuff, we just put our concerns on that and address them there. And then the legal stuff can be handled at that time before the board.
Yeah, the board handle.
It's not our ultimate
Right.
decision.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
all right, then.
So, yeah.
I guess we have a consensus.
Yeah, unless you want to, I'm not gonna write up a thing for, a thing to, ask the judge or, an attorney to look at right
No,
now.
I think like, I mean, I don't want to exclude this idea. I think like, I mean,
Yeah.
the
I can
the
address-
reasoning is there.
I can address in the minutes that, we discussed, there was some concern about the process of approving areas and the number of units. And if there is a concern about even that, I don't want to get in too much stuff, because then you open up and all of a sudden you create a fireball out of something.
Right.
You might want to use the word discussion rather than concern, Mike.
Right, yeah, yeah. And when I send the minutes out, please, I try and put the verbiage and stuff in there. And I know I'm not perfect and stuff on there, and sometimes it's a matter of semantics, using different things actually are better and stuff, but please give me your feedback if you think that
I'll prove
if it could be worded differently and stuff. A lot of the stuff you kind of look at, I think people just kind of, yeah, okay, good to go.
No, I think that's why I mean, we have a pretty good system in place. So you send out the minutes, we'll review and kind of provide you feedback. So we'll continue doing that.
Any other discussions on this?
Yeah, what I think we should do is schedule a meeting for next month. Contact the developer here on the storage building and tell him that we'd like to meet with him next month at our regular meeting. And we'll bring up all our concerns with what he submitted up to this point. So we can have a face-to-face meeting with him and go through the whole project, expressing the initial concerns we got, and set expectations of what we're going to be looking for. I think that's what they want. And I think it makes sense. That gives us the time we need to develop our own thoughts and write your concerns down, your questions, and then we meet with them
Yeah, as a formal preliminary site plan review.
and go forward from there. So, you know, we won't send them anything ahead of time or nothing. We'll just tell them we want to meet with them and get it on their schedule and go from there.
Right, as a preliminary site plan review, just,
Yep, it's just part of the,
yep, okay.
Okay.
So you don't want even to provide him the feedback that we already,
We can provide him with that. To say we've seen it here, but we would do our formal preliminary site plan review at the next
Right.
February meeting. And he could address that or not address it there, and still it doesn't mean he can't have, we get that process in there and he can start considering, because when you do a preliminary review, what you're doing is telling him, here's things that you need to go back and readdress. So that shouldn't hold up his,
I'm sure he'd appreciate knowing these few
Yes.
things right now
yeah.
before that meeting.
Yeah, and just for your background, Mike, when they were here last time, there was one of the sketch plan stuff that these guys presented. There was stuff that came out just like the day prior. And then at the board, they presented another sketch plan as an ad hoc thing. And that's what we wanted to try and get away from. And that was my concern for bringing up all the legal issues too, was, if there's a possibility that the people agreed with some of my initial thoughts, then we, if did they take out of the sketch plan review, we'll go do this, we'll go buy the property and blah, blah, blah. And if it turned out later that the stuff was, not that way, then they would say, hey, we just did this and you set yourself up. So to preclude all that is all their stuff we should know about 2 weeks prior before meeting.
Anything else?
Just the agenda
Yep.
for next year.
Well, then also any public comment? And you want to schedule the next meeting?
Yeah, so the next meeting, the first I propose that we meet, as we did before, just every other month on the odd months, Thursday at 7 p.m. And then we hold the other meetings as needed during the even months, during the standard period, the second Thursday of the month. So it'd be just like we did last year. Then those dates would be, 1/11, 3/14, 5/9, 7/11, 9/12, and 11/13.
Isn't that 14?
I'm sorry, for 11/14. So I'll move that we approve the annual agenda for the 11th of January, 14th of March, 9th of May, 11th of July, 12th of September, and 14th of November, and then we meet as needed.
Are we
For the
meeting in
other month.
February?
And then that's a separate thing, but I would say we'd meet. So just the motion to approve the regular meetings. For that, I'll move those dates. I second. Okay. I'm gonna call the vote.
Yep, I'll vote. Terry?
Yes.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Mike is Mike. I say yes.
I say, but yes,
Bill?
yes.
Okay. approved. That's the annual stuff. So, and then we'll meet next time on September or February 8th.
Yeah, February 8th, yeah.
7 o'clock.
Okay.
We voted for that too.
No.
No.
Anything else? Any other comments?
Terry, did you have anything you needed to?
You already took my thunder, Tom.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, because we didn't have a meeting last week, so there's no real updates, but February I'll have an update for you.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Meeting closed.
I'll pay right.
Perfect.
Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate your putting up with us.
Thanks, Tom.
Right back,
Right.
right back at you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Bye.
see you
Yep.
guys.